is Margaret Catherine Kate Moore. I was born in South Carolina in 1752 with my parents Charles and Mary Moore. I was the eldest out of 10 children, not fun. At the young age of 15 in 1767, I married Andrew Barry, captain and commanding officer in the Continental Army. We had lived approximately 2 miles from my childhood home. My husband and I settled on Walnut Grove in Roebuck in South Carolina. Eventually, Andrew and I had 3 children of our own, and that brought up to me being a housewife, but soon I showed a very heroic strength in the Revolutionary War through scouting and assistance. The American Views claimed me as one of the first American heroines and recognized my declarations after the War for Independence. With my husband Andrew away with other Southerns for independence, I was left to be a single mother of 3. I was an excellent horsewoman, greatly skilled in riding horseback. In addition to my talents, I was also very familiar with the, according to legend and American Revolutionary War facts, states. Apparently, I tied my 2-year-old child to the bedpost to be able to ride through Native American trails to warn my neighbors the British were invading. General Cornwallis apparently informed that the British troops outnumbered the South. So I single-handedly gathered enough local patriotic men for an even battle, while General Morgan set traps for the British troops when they came along. When the Redcoats retreated, the heroines of history reported they fell into the hands of General George Washington at Yorktown in Virginia. At Yorktown, General Collins decided to make the final surrender, ending the Revolutionary War and granting America their independence from the British rule. A few years later, I sadly died on September 29, 1823.
Frances Lightfoot Lee. I was born in Westmoreland, Virginia on the 14th of October in 1734. I was educated at home by Dr. Craig in the manner of an enlightened country gentleman. In 1765, I was elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, where I served until 1775. I was noted a radical on the side of Patrick Henry in opening the Stamp Act. I joined the group who called for a General Congress and a Virginia Convention in 1774. I attended that convention and that year was sent to the First Continental Congress. I represented my state there until 1779, working on numerous committees. I retired from the Congress in 1779 and returned to my home. I served for a while in the Virginia Senate and then retired to private life. I died in 1797, 10 days after my wife Rebecca Lee had died.
Hello, fellow Americans. I'm a fellow patriot, John Hancock. I was born on the 23rd of January, 1737 in Quincy, Massachusetts. I am one of the heroes who made this beautiful nation of the United States of America during the American Revolution. I will be talking about my success in the American Revolution. Before I entered politics, I was a successful businessman in trading goods. I inherited the business from my uncle. I became good friends with political activists James Otis and Samuel Adams, and we criticized the Britain's strict tax laws. The British imposed the Townshend Acts. It affected wealthy merchants like me. The British customs agents boarded my ship and tried to confiscate my goods and ship. My fellow colonists grew angry at the British, which led to the Boston Massacre. I led a committee demanding the removal of British troops from Boston, and they agreed troop withdrawal. A few years later, I was elected president of the Massachusetts Provincial Congress of 1774. A few months later, I was chosen as a Massachusetts delegate of the Second Continental Congress. In 1775, Samuel Adams and I avoided arrest in Lexington after Paul Revere warned us that the British were coming. In May of 1775, I was elected president of the Continental Congress. In June, George Washington was chosen as the commander of the Continental Army. On July 4th, 1776, I was the first person to put my famous signature on the Declaration of Independence. After I resigned as head of Continental Congress, in 1777, I led 5,000 troops to Newport, Rhode Island to recapture it from the British. Even though the mission was a failure, I was still an honorable figure, and I went on to be the elected governor of Massachusetts. I served as governor through the war, but resigned in 1785 for health reasons. I ran for president in the first election, but lost to George Washington and John Adams. I had lots of things that happened and how I felt in my life after the American Revolution. As I mentioned earlier, I kept serving in politics after the war, like continuing to be governor of Massachusetts and run for president in the first election of the U.S. When I raided Newport, I wished I could have been more successful in it so I could have more military experience. I am proud of the American independence, and as I get revived in 2021, even more proud to see that you kept democracy and freedom in my country.
Hello, fellow American. I am Samuel L. Adams. I was a hero of the Revolutionary War and part of the First and Second Continental Congress. I am one of the most important people in the Revolutionary War, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Right now, I'm going to talk about my family in formation. I was born on September 27th, 1722, in my humble little town of Braintree, Massachusetts. You may not recognize this place, as now they have named it Quincy for some wild reason. My father was Samuel Adams Sr., and my mother was Mary Fitfin. My parents were wealthy merchants who were born in the Americas. Unfortunately, they passed away in the summer of March 8th, 1748. They died together, letting death grasp his whole cold hands on their lifeless bodies. May God bless their soul. After my parents had died, I quickly became poor, as I didn't know how to manage my money. But this got better over the years, though. I also was able to find my lovely spouse, who I loved until the day I died. We had 5 children. However, only one made it past a year without dying of disease. I named that boy Samuel Adams Jr. He was born in 1751 and lived for 37 years. When my parents were still alive, I went to Harvard University and got a master's degree. I then went to study law, but my mother stopped me and put me as a cashier in a clothing shop. I was angry at my mother for not letting me go into law, but it didn't matter. Fate would catch up with me anyways. When I first heard of the British taxing the colonies, I was enraged. It felt unfair that they were taxing us after we had helped them in the French and Indian War. But now, not only that, but now they are keeping 10,000 British soldiers in our own homes and telling us to pay for their needs. I spoke out against this unfair treatment, and people listened to me and my inspiring words. In the summer of 1770, I heard some terrible news. 5 colonists were killed by British soldiers in what is now known as the Boston Massacre. This event outraged us. I immediately took action, saying that the soldiers should be punished, and I heavily publicized this issue. On December 16th, 1776, my 60-some supporters and I went to the harbor of Boston, Massachusetts, and threw tea into the ocean off a cargo ship of now what is called the Boston Tea Party. I publicized the issue of the Boston Massacre and taxation without representation. I even attended the First and Second Continental Congress. Then it happened. The news about the Lexington and Concord battles came in the newspaper. I was surprised that we would actually start a war with Britain. But nevertheless, I supported the war effort with the colonists. During the Revolutionary War, I signed the Declaration of Independence, and now I am considered a founding father of America. When I heard we had won the war, I was shocked. How could a small nation defeat the powerhouse of the world? Nevertheless, I was enjoying. However, I was iffy about if we could run the new government and make sure there isn't only one person in charge. I also worried how we would manage our money. We were in heavy debt due to the war, and I worried we would be bankrupt before we even had time to celebrate or win. Thankfully, we got past that time and then called ourselves Americans. After the war, I had become a state senator of Massachusetts and eventually became the governor. From these new jobs, I was able to become wealthy again. Not only did I get wealthy, but I also got a lot of fame and recognition. If I could change my life and do something differently, I would have tried to talk it out with Britain and show the citizens what they are doing to the colonists. If the citizens of Britain have sympathy for us, they may make a mob and force the kings to get rid of the rules set in place for our unfair treatment. I would like to tell you people to get better politics. It's crazy how people are doing insane stuff just to show their opinion nowadays. I would also help the branches of government become more trained and more focused on issues like climate change and on how to make money. So today, you have learned my life story and how it was important to the Revolutionary War. You may think that without me, we had never won, and to that you may be correct. But who knows? The past never spills its secrets.
We'll be telling you about my life as a founding father and a patriot to our country. I was born on the date of January 17th, 1706, at Milk Street, Boston, Massachusetts. I would later die from complications of pleurisy on April 17th, 1790. I'd lived in Boston for 17 years of my life. I lived from Boston to Philadelphia to Paris in the span of 79 years. I was 8 years of age when I was sent to Boston's Latin School with a view to be trained for a career in theology. Dolefully, I had attended for only a year. Subsequently, my father sent me to another school for writing and arithmetic. Later, at 10 years old, I would be taken out of school to aid my father's business. I was a revolutionary patriot. I had many gifts and turned them for the service of our country. I had an unshakable faith for the future of this country, even in the dark days when everyone had doubted. One way that I conveyed my beliefs of mine was being one of the 3 men to draw up the Declaration of Independence. I certainly contributed to the outcome of the war in many ways and fought for the rights of Native Americans. I was certainly delighted with the result of the war. I had done so much for the country. After the war, my life had changed. I was selected to serve as a delegate in the Second Continental Council and additionally helped in drafting of the Declaration of Independence, which declared freedom from British rule. If I were to have done anything differently in the war, I would have made the war less violent and changed the national bird. I would like to inform the generations after me of what I had fought for and my major impact in making America. I would also like them to know about my philosophy and how important it is to be a patriot and have pride in your country. I'm proud of my inventions still being used today, but I'm saddened of the division that has been created in the beautiful country. Some advice that I would give the country is you ought to set aside your differences and unite as a country for the greater good. A key thing that is to be remembered is my almanac, and abide by the quotes in my almanac. Love your enemies, for they tell you your faults. Poor Richard's Almanac, 1756. No gains without pain. Poor Richard's Almanac, 1745. Look before or you'll find yourself behind. Poor Richard's Almanac, 1735.
Sailor across the 7 seas, and the bravery of the many men who fought for me in the United States to break free from Britain. And also I'll share how I almost sank the entire British Navy. But I must start with how I was born. I was born in the small Scottish town of Kirkcudbright. It was a bright and shiny day on July 7th, 1747, when I saw the first light of day. My father, who was John Paul Jones Sr., was a gardener. While he was taking care of people's lawns, he saw my mother, Ginny Macduff. She was a small farmer passing through Kirkcudbright to sell her crops. For them, it was love at first sight. They ended up having 7 kids, which I was the 4th child. I loved the idea of sailing, so when I got older, I sailed to my brother, William Jones's house in America. I loved it there, so when I got older, I'll move there. I'll share my successes in America for you now. I joined the British Royal Navy as a midshipman when I was young. After proving my worth, I was rapidly promoted to an officer. When my ship passed an island in the Indies, the crew revolted, including the captain, so to save my life, I shot the captain. I was now charged with murder of a high rank, so in fear, I went to America to live with my brother. After a little while, I got bored and saw the colonies were breaking free from Britain, so I joined the American Navy as a captain. I was a brave, bold officer serving in a lot of battles. I raided British ports and sank almost all British ships, including the pride of their Royal Navy, the Wilhelm Richard. I convinced America was worth fighting by convincing my crew and fighting in many battles. I also sank so many ships that people read newspapers about my successes. So they enlisted in the Army and Navy to hopefully become famous like me. In the end, I had a successful life in the Navy, but little did I know what would happen to me after the war. After the war, I returned to the United States, hopefully to live a peaceful life in the land I fought for. While the government had other plans, I became a foreign diplomat for America. I handled foreign affairs and all the issues the states had. Well, I do live in slight regret now that I'm thinking about it. I drank too much. Before I died, I got deported from Russia by the Turkish invaders. I got reassigned by the president to handle the issue of merchants that got captured by the Algerian leader. In my room at a hotel, you could say I drank too much. So I soon died of kidney failure in that room. No one saw me die, but I was buried with full honors by the United States Navy. In the end, I lived an exciting life full of daring adventures. I wish that people of America live a long life in the land of the free. I wish people believe it's the freest and bravest country of them all, and that they respect the many people who fought for it.
Benedict Arnold III and Hannah Waterman King. I was married to Margaret Mansfield and had a total of 8 children. When I was a kid, I was an apprentice to the apothecary business, and then later the militia. I was an American officer who served during the Revolutionary War. I was a major general in the American Colonial Continental Army. I was born in 1741 in Norwich, Connecticut, and died in 1801 in London. When I first began my military career, I was a captain in the Connecticut militia. During the beginning and the middle of the war, I fought for America, but then I defected to the British side in 1780 for 20,000 pounds, which is equal to $1 million US. In exchange, I surrendered Fort West Point in New York, and the British rewarded me by giving me the rank of Brigadier General. They also gave me land in Canada. By turning to the British side, I thought I wasn't feeling appreciated by my country. I thought turning to the British side, I thought I would get recognition. At the end of the war, I proved myself to be a strong leader. If something I would tell people today is that if you would die in battle, you will die knowing that your country and families will live freely. That's it.
And I was born in Boston, Massachusetts on September 9, 1711. Before I became governor of Massachusetts, I studied a lot about businessmen and politics. I also went to Harvard University. I also didn't like Lord North, the British Prime Minister, and I blamed him for all of my issues most of the time. I was unpopular because I started colonial unrest with decisions I made in Congress. That is also why a lot of mobs came after me and tried to kill me. I supported Parliament and didn't like British taxes, so I threatened the British tax collectors with their jobs. The reason why I blamed them is because I thought the taxes were too high and we would have a lower population. The people that I supported the British burned my house and looted it because they were mad I was threatening them with their jobs in order to stop them from collecting taxes. Even though they burned my house down, I survived and didn't die. I was born in I died on June 3rd, 1780 in Brompton, England. I also wish I would have kept my thoughts to myself so I wouldn't accidentally start a war. After the war, I was a deep loyalist and I resisted the movement toward independence from the British Crown.
King George Francis III. I am wonderful, aren't I? What is important about me? I was born to George Francis II in 1738 in southern England. I lived my entire life in southern England. I also had 15 children. Only 3 died. I was against independence as the colonies were profitable to the monarchy. And I was and still am absolutely determined to keep the colonies under my control. I enacted many laws to keep the colonies in line. Unfortunately, it backfired. One misconception that people may have nowadays is that the militaries are controlled directly by me. In actuality, militaries controlled most of my parliament, and I did not have much say in it. I now want to address some things that has bothered me for 245 years. 1, the loss of the colonies. 2, me going mad. First of all, the loss of the colonies, in my opinion, was not my fault. As like I said before, I did not have a say in it. Although once the colonies had been lost, I did accept it at the what's it called, Treaty of Paris. And in my time, I had my mental health had decreased as the war went on. People calling me unfit to rule. Because of this, I had arrested multiple parliament leaders and attempted to prevent multiple riots in London and surrounding cities. Later on, I was even quoted, "Anybody who's not my ally is my enemy," and they are to be destroyed. Second of all, the insane theory about me going mad was totally false, and not at all because of a rare plague disease. These things included hallucinations, profound sweating, and even blue pee. It's called. I've even been known to talk to the walls or paintings in my palace. I lived most of my life, lived my entire life in southern England, but I died the same place I was born, in Windsor Castle, in 18. Sorry, not in 18. That's the wrong date actually. I believe it was 1785.
I was born in Philadelphia on August 5th, 1704. I'm of Irish-Scottish descent. My father had immigrated to America from Dungan County, Tyrone, Ireland. My father was William Allen Sr. My wife was Margaret Hamilton. I had 6 children by the names of John, Andrew, James, William, Anne, and Margaret. My sons became loyalists, much like I was. I was a loyalist on the British side, loyal to the Royal Crown. I spent most of my time in England. This is where I grew up. I went to law school in England. I went to England in 1774, where I published The American Crisis. The American Crisis proposed that the American colonies be under direct rule by the Royal Crown. I was disappointed with the way the war ended because I tried to revert the colonies to be under direct rule. I returned to Philadelphia in 1779 to Mount Airy, my mansion outside Philadelphia.
My name is Ethan Allen. I was born on January 21st, 1738. My life had begun in Cornwall, Connecticut, and later lived in Burlington, Vermont. My mom and dad are named Joseph Allen and Mary Allen. I had 5 children named Lorraine Allen, Joseph Allen, Lucy Allen, Mary Allen, and Pamelia Allen, along with my wife, Mary Brownson, and second wife, Fanny Margaret. I died on February 12th, 1789. I fought on the colonist side in the Revolutionary War. My reasons for fighting in the war is because I was a patriot to the colonies and had argued that the value of any land was created solely by those who made it productive by working on the land. I conveyed my beliefs by war as a leader in the Green Mountain Boys in Vermont for the capture of Fort Ticonderoga, which I had been successful at fighting the British forces, which helped made a part of the reason why we won the revolution, with winning more protection from Britain at the outcome of the battle. In the outcome of the battle of the war, I was doing what I could to get the state of Vermont and the U.S. independent from Britain by my fighting, my friendship with the Green Mountain Boys, and the courage I had gained through the tough experiences as a kid. My feelings of the outcome of the war was not happy, because at one point of the war, I had been captured by the British Army and taken as prisoner and suffered harshly in Britain. My life after the war, I was released from prison after others found me. Then, I petitioned to have Vermont become a state, but I had failed at first, so I tried to have Vermont become part of Canada and focus more on politics. What I could have done differently is that I could become a good philosopher in the war instead of fighting in the Battle of Fort Ticonderoga, and I could have stayed in Connecticut and fight in their battles, such as the Battle of Ridgefield. What I would say to the people 245 years later is that I am proud of how this nation has fought and has grown huge, big, and powerful, with many states. Especially the state Vermont has become successful as a future state. My relationship with my family. My first wife, Mary Brownson, were not a happy married couple, such as I believed in reason and logic about freedom from Britain, but Mary did not like philosophy and writing. She believed that everyone should follow the rules of religion, which was not my interest. Sadly, my 3 children of mine died of illness at an early age. One of those illnesses were smallpox, but 2 of them grew up and had children, and sooner grandchildren. Some other interesting facts about me are, first, is that I grew up on a frontier land, so my childhood included me learning about hunting, fighting, growing crops, and learned to survive around my immediate surroundings. Second, what pulled me into the Revolutionary War was the battles of Lexington and Concord. Third, I was a farmer, a businessman, a land speculator, a philosopher, a writer, and I was a big interest in politics.
My name is Abigail Adams, and I was born on November 11, 1744. I grew up in Weymouth, Massachusetts, a village somewhat 12 miles from Boston. My father, who was William Smith, was minister of the First Congregational Church there, and also made a living as a farmer. My mother and father, who was Elizabeth Quincy Smith, both belonged to distinguished families in New England. My mother's father, John Quincy, was an activist in the colonial government and served as Speaker of the Massachusetts Assembly for 40 years. Since I was educated at home, I began to read widely from my family's library. When I was just 11, my sisters and I began receiving tutoring from Richard Cranch, a transplant from New England, who later married my elder sister, Mary. A friend of Cranch's, a young lawyer named John Adams, met me, and he and I fell in love. After a long engagement that my parents insisted on, John and I got married on October 24th, 1764. When I was 19, he was 28. Together we moved to John's family farm in Braintree, south of Boston, and had 3 sons and 2 daughters. Our 3 sons were John Quincy Adams, who later became president, Charles Adams, Thomas Boylston Adams. Likewise, our two daughters were Abigail Adams Smith and Suzanne Adams. As John increasingly traveled as a lawyer, political revolutionary, and after the revolution, a diplomat, I managed our farm and business affairs while raising our children. I also made investment decisions that enhanced my family's prosperity at the time, and I was a great activist for women's rights, as well as an abolitionist. I was an unofficial supervisor to my husband, John Adams, who served as Vice President and President of the United States. I was the first woman to serve as Second Lady of the United States from 1789 to 1797, and the second woman to serve as the First Lady from 1797 to 1801. I died on October 28, 1818, sadly, in Quincy, Massachusetts Bay, at the age of 73 due to typhoid fever, 2 weeks before my 74th birthday.
Hello, my name is George Washington. I was born on February 22nd, 1732. I lived in Westmoreland County, Virginia, and died on December 14th, 1777. My parents are Augustine Washington and Mary Ball Washington. My wife or spouse's name is Martha Dandridge. I married Martha in 1759. Martha was born on June 2nd, 1731. Me and Martha had no children. I was on the colonist or revolutionist side in the Revolutionary War because of myself having good leadership qualities and helping the revolutionists. I was on the revolutionist side because the government was making unfair, arbitrary rules. If I were to give advice to someone, I would say to always speak up for what you believe in. If it's someone not being fair, or like me, where the British government was making arbitrary laws. My life changed after the war because I became known as a hero and became the first president of the United States.
Hello, my name is Nathaniel Greens, and I am a Major General in the Continental Army. I was born in July 27th, 1742. I was born at Potawatomi, Rhode Island. My father was the minister of the Society of Friends, Quakers, and a successful businessman. After I moved out to help, and I helped found the Kentish Guard. My participation was challenged because of a limp I had since I was a child. But my friend, who was an influential person in the Kentish Guard, threatened to resign if I was forced to leave. Later, I became a brigadier of the state troops of the Continental Army. When I met George Washington at the Siege of Boston, I made a very good impression on him. Later, he was to say I was one of his top generals. And if he died or was captured, I was supposed to take over of the command of the Continental Army. I was put in charge of the Brooklyn defenses since the British were most likely going to attack at Brooklyn. In August, I was promoted to Major General. Later, I was in command of the forces in protecting New Jersey shores at Fort Lee. I was later promoted to quartermaster because of my victory at the New Jersey shore. I later took commands at the front lines and engaged in the Connecticut farms in New Jersey. I also took an active role in the Battle of Monmouth. I had to fight Lieutenant General Charles Earl Cornwallis. The area was a logistical nightmare. First, I needed to equip my troops because the equipment was getting dirty and was no longer really usable. But at least I made sure that that my troops were at least equipped. I later resigned quartermaster because I did not agree with what the Congress was doing, saying that the state needed to make it where, it's confusing. I did not agree with the requisitioning of the supplies, the individual states. Later, I was given command at West Point. After Major General Hortenio Gates was defeated by the British Army at the Battle of Camden, Washington appointed me the new Southern General. Morgan was I sent troops to threaten Morgan at the local and to get local boost of the militia at the Battle of Yorktown. Later, I ordered him to send an army to go intercept the enemy general because he was attacking, and we needed to do a pincer flank to stop him from crossing the shore. Later, after that was the last battle of the Revolution, I then moved with my family to my new estate, Mulberry Grove, just north of Savannah, Georgia. I tried to do the life of a Southern planter while spurning the attempt in the prominent Georgia tried to involve me with local politics. Later, I gave up my land and some of my wealth to make sure that the U.S. could pay off its war debts. I later died of a stroke because of mild sun exposure.